Sir Arthur is known as the ninth Governor General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, who served from 2010 to 2014. However, his journey started from Matthewtown in Agua as he left for Nassau to work and eventually worked for the Tribune and the Guardian, and ultimately became a journalist. Sir Arthur tells us about his early years.
Well, I'm a Bahamian. I was born at Matthewtown in Agua, May 11, 1928. And my history goes on from there. I came to Nassau around between 8 and 9. I was the sort that I lived with my godparents. That period was not very happy. It was my godmother, who was an older lady. She was American, actually, Mrs. Richardson. And she thought I was a little devil, and she treated me as such, you know. But I got through all of that, and I started, you know, back then we had a practice in the summer when you got a certain age. During the summer, our parents would look for somewhere for us to go to learn a trade. And so one summer, would you believe it, I did tailoring with Mr. Robert Bingham, who was a tailor, a first-class tailor in the city. Back then, tailoring was quite a thing in Nassau because wealthy people came here and bought from the stores English cloth, doeskins and gabardines and all that sort of thing. And they would go to the tailors, Bingham, Lunn, and they would have 3-4 suits done up, you know, and go back home. Beautifully tailored. So that was one. But the next summer, I went to the Tribune. And then the summer after that, I went to the Guardian. I can't remember how many summers there were. So, you know, the rule then, school leaving was 14. So I was 14, just going on 15, Western Senior. Then I left school and went straight to work for the Guardian. We had done, my cousin and I, Stafford Simon Lee, I think we did 2 summers at the Guardian and 1 summer at the Tribune. I think that's what it was, yeah. So that summer we went straight to the Guardian. And I became a linotype operator at the Guardian. And I have to confess that I was pretty good at it. But then domestic affairs interfered, and my life was turned upside down again, and I had to go back to Inagua because my godparents didn't want me anymore. And I just started to make good money at the Guardian, you know, as a linotype operator. And so I went back to Inagua. I stayed in Inagua for about a year. This was 1947. I stayed there for a while, and I came back to Nassau. I went back to the Guardian. I was knocking around for weeks, no employment, low on money, all that sort of thing. And my job, of course, somebody else was doing that. So I had a godfather there named Mr. Noel Mallet, and he said, well, after we can't, there's no space for linotype operator, but we could take you on as a proofreader. And of course I said, thank you. So from the Guardian I remember one day, it was in 48, because I just come back from, I left Inagua short, we didn't stay in Inagua long. And I was knocking around there before I got a job, before they took me on, because the Ericksons are the only people who could employ you. So I was at the Guardian working, and I got a call from another godfather who was working at the Tribune, Sir Richardson. And he said, Mr. Depute wants to speak with you, and he wants to offer you a job. He heard that you're a very good linotype operator, and would you come to the Tribune? So I said, yes. And so I went to the Tribune, and interestingly, you know what a linotype operator is? A linotype operator. We didn't have all this modern stuff we have now. We had to set type. That column of type had to be set with hot metal. And this machine produced it. You go online and see old pictures of them. It's a beautiful, it was a technology, you know, it was quite a marvel of a machine, really, very complicated, and you would type the thing up and the metal slugs would come out with the letters on them. And these were whatever you were putting into type, that was it. But the machines were very, very, very complex and very complicated. And one of the things I had to do was Etienne Depute, when he was in the South End, he would bring his column to me to do. And after a while, we got to talking about it, you know. He would ask me, son, what do you think about my column? And then I would talk to him, and surprisingly, he became very interested in my views. And sometimes he even changed things that he wrote on, you know, because I said, well, the terminology we use under Mr. Etienne. I would say, well, what about this? And we would have a debate, and he said, oh, that's a good point, you know, son. And then he would change it and whatnot. And then he said, you know, later on, he said, you know, would you like to be a reporter? And I said, yes, sir. And he gave me a first assignment. It was to cover a concert by Meta Davis at St. Matthew's School. You know Meta Davis? Meta Davis was she was the wife of Dr. Cumberbatch, but that was her professional name. She was an accomplished pianist. And so I went to cover the concert. Now, I admit that I had very little musical knowledge, so I didn't concentrate on the music. I concentrated on the atmosphere and all the rest of that, and so on and so forth. And I turned in a piece, and he was quite pleased. And that launched my career as a journalist.
In our conversation, I asked the author what led to the start of the Bahamian Times. He shared that it all began with the PLP fighting to become the government.
It's to have to go back a bit. You know, the PLP was founded by a couple of Bahamians, and now skin color back then was very important. Foolishly, but that's where we were at the time. Eh? And these very fair-skinned men formed the PLP. And the PLP did something, H.M. Taylor mainly did something that had never been done before. H.M. Taylor made the Progressive Liberal Party was the first national party in the sense that it had representations in all the islands. Mr. Taylor himself went to these islands and established branches that had never been done before. We had political parties before. They came and they went. A prominent one you might note in your history books was the Ballot Party. I forget the names of those people at the time, fighting for the ballot. And there were a number of parties that came and went. But this party was established as a national party. And I know about this because I used to work at the Tribune, like I mentioned, and Mr. Taylor's house was on far away, and I used to go around the corner to his house. And he had something called a Gestetner machine. That's an old ancient way of copying things. You cut a stencil and you copy it. And he would cut stencils and he had to be turned, and I would go and help him to do copies. and then you would type in the name of the branch and the people who you're sending the letter to. So I knew about that. But then there was a group of us young men, and this is really, I think, quite remarkable in our political history. A group of young men used to get together, drink, in clubs and all that sort of thing. A favorite spot was Percy Munner's place on Wolf Road, Central Highway. And we started to talk. One thing was we all had a passion for reading, and that was very essential. We read. That was the one thing we had in common. And we used to sit and we talk. And we came to the conclusion that this organization could be the instrument to bring the fullness of democracy and equality to black Bahamians. And we were unapologetic about that because color was a big issue back then. Race was the prime issue. We were governed by what I call a classic oligarchy. And this oligarchy controlled everything, commercially, politically. They controlled every aspect of our lives. The problem in the government high school was they could only take a handful of students every year. And so very few of us at that time were able to go off to get a university education. I went as far as grade 5 at Western Senior, and that was at the end of my formal education. But one thing I learned that I suppose it was innate in us, English literature. That was something that opened many doors. And I tell young people today, if I had to give one piece of advice with one word, I would say read. When we developed a love for reading, we read everything we could lay our hands on. We read classics, of course, Shakespeare, Dickens, all the rest of them. And then we got around to reading political stuff, Karl Marx and all that. I remember when a couple of the first college-educated fellows came back from school, and they would meet with us in the clubs, and I remember one in particular, I won't call his name, he's pontificate. Well, Karl Marx said so-and-so, and one of us would say, no, that's not what Karl Marx said. He said, you read Karl Marx? And we said, yes, we did. Anyway, the point is that at Western Senior School, we got that one powerful weapon, and we use that in our political careers.
So authors share that one of the real purposes of the paper was to take the shackles off the Bahamian people's minds so that they know that they too can run the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Clement Maynard, who was a part of our group, the NCPA, he could fly to England at concessional prices because his wife worked for BOAC, or British Air. And every time he went around, he'd have our list of books. And we got to read everything we could find about ancient African history. And it was so revealing, And so we decided that, fighting them and talking about them is one thing. But like Elo said, we had to deal with our own people, the shackles on their minds, not the shackles on their legs. And that is what we did. To educate our people and to give them the confidence to know that we can govern ourselves. We decided that it was essential, instead of us backing off and whatnot and, running for cover, we had to make more sacrifices if necessary. And that is why I left my my job with the Tribune in early in 1963 to start Bahamian Times. And the people who were involved with that were our closest collaborators were Warren Lavarity, Jeff Thompson, and myself as the editor. But they were the principal one. But others helped. So Milo, who was an older politician, he helped us with some money, some financing. And we had people, we opened a business, we opened our shop on Wolf Road in an old house that Percy Munnins gave us. And that became a meeting place, a hothouse for politics, not just for the paper. And you would recognize the names of those who were in the NCPA. Because we gradually expanded our reach, we got more and more people in. We did quite a job of taking over the party from the inside and radicalizing the party. And some of those names were Simeon Bowe, Chadwell and Bristol, trade unions, Clement Maynard, I just mentioned to you. Well, I mentioned Warren. And there was a young man who used to come by to help us with the paper. A number of people would just drop in to help. You know, they were so intrigued at what we were doing, they would drop in. And one of those young men was George Smith. And George was much younger than us, but George became a passionate supporter, and as you know, had a tremendous career in politics. And even though he stayed with the PLP after the split with the FNM, we remained good friends up until the day of his death, right? Good friends.
Although he led the paper, Sir Arthur shared with us some of the people who helped to produce the paper, and its success was really because of their work.
But there were some people who produced the paper, the pressman and the linotype operator, again, set at the time. We started right off with offset printing, which was radical back then, new stuff, eh? The Tribune, I think, was just making the changeover around that time. But we had a good pressman, camera room and all that, George Sands. And we had this old press that we got out of Florida. And sometimes the paper would all over the place, and George would wake and he would be there sweating over this press, you know. And he was just remarkable, George Sands. A hero of the moment who people don't know very much about. And we had another one, Dudley Gilbert, who was a linotype operator at the Tribune and who came with us. A great sacrifice of themselves. And these were not frontline politicians, you know. These are people whose name we didn't know. And so we had a number of people like that who would come and help because we had no money. We couldn't get advertising. The merchants were afraid to advertise with us. There were very few who put in little advertisements that big, and we were very grateful for that. But the paper, the money I got, I was the highest paid person on the Tribune staff, because when I left, I was editor, news editor. I was the highest paid person outside anyone in the family, in the Dubuque family, as news editor.
What was the salary at that time?
I think it was £32 or something, which is some good money back then. Some good money. But the Bahamian Times they couldn't pay me. So I gave up a good job to do that. And sometimes I had to go across the road to Jimmy Shepherd to borrow money to buy something for my kids, because I already had a house full of children. Those were some very difficult days, but some very exciting days as well, because we were committed, fully committed to what we were doing. And the paper was a success in terms of its readership. I mean, on a Saturday, people would stand outside and wait for the paper, and the paper went from hand to hand. Oh, another one who was a part of our movement, Jane Nuri, Dr. Eugene Nuri. He died recently too. Gene was not, he didn't run, but right after he started, Gene went off to continue. He was a mature student, we call it. He went to Paris and to Brussels, I think, to continue his education as a neurosurgeon, and he became a neurosurgeon, Princess Margaret. Gene would write articles on Africa from Europe for us, for the paper. It was an exciting time. We were exhilarated by what we were doing. We caught out, yeah. Sometimes we couldn't eat, but the strange thing is, people would always give us a bottle. And sometimes I think of myself back then, as the old reporters you see in the movies, sitting down with a typewriter, cigarette dangling on a glass or something in it.
Life was not easy for Sir Arthur, and he made many sacrifices when he joined the Bahamian Times. He resoundingly declared that he had no regrets doing so, other than being able to feed his family. His work is entrenched in the history of journalism and Bahamian politics.